Hello there, everybody. Hopefully you can see me, you can hear me, and I am live. What I'm going to do before we start this evening's session about how to boost your scores using exam technique, I am going to wait a couple of minutes just to make sure that everybody is here, that everybody can see and hear me, and that everybody's managed to find me. So bear with me for about a minute and then we will get started straight away. So what I'm going to do is just do a little bit of a refresh, make sure that I can see where I am and what I'm doing, and we should be ready to go. All right, let's have a look. Here we are. Okay, if you can see me and you know that I am there, please let me know in the comments. Give me a wave, give me a hello, and tell me that you are here because it's always nice to know that we are joined today. So tell me who you are and welcome to this evening's conversation all about exam technique. Hi guys, everyone's saying hello. Perfect. People can see me, people can hear me. That's always good. So we'll get started in just a moment. Perfect. Okie dokes. Right, so I want to know, what do we think about when you're thinking exam technique? What does exam technique really mean to you? Does it mean checking? Does it mean something that's a bit confusing and weird and magical? What does the word exam technique make you think of? Please do put your answers down in the comments so that I can see, so that this can help me throughout this evening. So yeah, so over to you. What is exam technique as you understand it right now? And then I can have a look, have a notes. So what do you think exam technique is? How can you, oh, we've got some answers coming in. How to attain the best accuracy in answering and speed. There's definitely some of that we'll be talking about this evening. Yes, so there is a bit of exam accuracy, a bit of speed in there. What else? What else? Anyone else's idea on what they think exam technique might be? How to approach a question, how to approach a paper. Exactly. We're going to be talking all about how do you talk about a paper in whole. We're not talking just about maybe one question, but actually the whole process of sitting down and doing the 11 plus. Like, what is that technique around it? The strategy, exactly the strategy of how you do an exam. All right. Perfect. So now that I know that you're all awake and you are all listening to me, you can all hear me well. Just to introduce myself for this evening. So my name is Gemma Zoe Smith, and I am the director here at the Education Hotel. I'm also an admin with Private and Grammar School Information Group. I work with students who are entering top schools and top universities as well, and who are preparing, and really the thing that I particularly look at is highly selective schools. I used to be a strategy consultant. I think about things kind of strategically before I qualified as a teacher. And for me, exam taking, it's not fun, but it's a bit like a puzzle. So there is always a way that you can improve, even if, as somebody has said in the comments, it's not really about content. At this point, if you are in year 5 or you're a parent of a year 5 student, most of your work won't necessarily be about learning new content. It will be revision, it will be exam technique. So that is what I'm here to talk this evening about. This is why we do these talks in Private and Grammar School Information Group, just so that we can give you guys more tips, more tricks, more information. So there's 3 kind of bits, and really what I want to talk about this evening is really why exam technique is important, and then a little bit about exam technique. So the way that I see it, there's more phases really of the 11 plus. You've got the foundational stuff, but then you learn all the material, you practice the material, you revise the material. But the bit that's sometimes missed out That's the exam technique. Lots and lots of focus always happens on the learning, the revising, the practicing. But if you don't understand the last piece, the exam technique, your exam grades go up and down and up and down, and they're not an increase, a nice steady increase. Simply knowing the knowledge is not enough. And I want you at this point to think of sports people, someone like a footballer. Before a footballer goes onto the pitch, they walk onto the pitch, they're not thinking about how to kick the ball. They're not thinking about how to save a goal. They are thinking about the strategy, the game strategy. They're thinking about what's going to happen half an hour away. What's going to happen if someone does this? If this happens, what do I do if this is going to happen? How do I make sure that my opponent is well marked? What types of things do I have at my disposal to be able to make sure that this game goes the way I want it to? Not really thinking about the skills that are behind that game because they've already learned it. And if you're going into 11 plus this year and you've got a child who's going into 11 plus this year, those skills are there. Those skills are learnt. It's now about being able to apply them. And so that's why often I get us to think about sports people, about kind of coaching within the sports world and within the kind of performance world as well. When an actor goes on to stage onto a musical, I've recently been watching Matilda on Netflix, so it's nice and fresh in my mind. They're not thinking necessarily about exactly what they have to say. They're thinking about it as a whole. And that's really what exam technique is there for. Exam technique is there to say, right, your knowledge is here. You've done the practice. You've done the revision. Let's make sure we can boost those skills and mean that you go in confident, you know exactly what you need to do. So that is all about exam technique. So when you've been doing exams, and whether these are practice papers, and whether you're watching this as a student or whether you're watching this as a parent, I would like to know which bits of this, so put the numbers down in the comments for me, what have you looked at? So have you looked at which corrections were easy? Are you aware of which corrections were hard for you? Did you go over your corrections and go, oh, that one makes sense, that one I actually have to go away and look at? Did you see where the corrections were in the paper? So have you looked at where they are in the paper? Have you looked at what might have been different for that paper? So maybe you did some practice papers at home and then you went into an exam hall and you did a mock paper and actually the marks might have differed. Have you reflected on that? Have you seen things that have gone right that previously would have gone wrong? And have you looked at timing? So stick those numbers down if you have come across corrections that are easy, if you come across corrections that are hard, if you have run out of time, let me know. Let me know what bits you have seen before, what bits you're aware of, because actually these are all different areas to focus on. For corrections easy, it's quite different to if a correction is hard. And the way that we solve it is maybe a little bit different as well. The technique behind it is a little bit hard, a little bit different. So we've got someone here that's running out of time. And it might not be in every paper. It might be in one paper. It might be many papers. It might be within a particular subject. But again, that running out of time, it really is a technique thing, necessarily a content thing. So some people have found corrections that are easy. Okay, so corrections that are easy are often corrections where you didn't read the question properly, or questions where you rushed the answer, or questions where you didn't sense check. And that's very different to number two, which is a correction that's very hard. So if a correction is really hard, it means you need to go back and you need to look at the material. So you need to actually go through and maybe look at reteaching in a different way, relearning some of that material. So if you've come across a mistake that's a number two mistake, so a correction that's hard, that's very different to a correction that's easy, because a correction that's easy is probably to do with reading the question. A correction that's hard means actually I probably need to revisit that term. I need to revisit that topic. If you've looked, and someone here is saying that they've looked at all of these things, which is amazing. If you've looked at where your corrections happen in the paper, that might tell you a little bit as to where you're losing focus. So if you tend to find that there's 2 or 3 mistakes that you make right at the start of the paper, that means you're rushing the start. And it helps you then to know that's where I need to go back. If I'm making mistakes, and I tend to make 2 or 3 right at the start of the paper, then when I'm finished, I have to go back to the start of the paper. And I've got to do those questions again. I'm going to cover the answer up and I'm just going to completely do it again, because that's the point where I tend to make mistakes. If you know that you make the mistakes in the middle, or if you're a parent watching this, you know your child makes mistakes in the middle of the paper, are they getting a little bit tired? Do you actually just need to, in the middle of the paper, draw a line and just take 30 seconds, count backwards from 30, pick the pen back up and go again? Almost like you're taking 2 separate papers. If you've got areas at the end, it probably means you're rushing. Quite a few of you have said that you may have run out of time. If you're running out of time, number 6, then consider, as I said before, ruling a line halfway through your paper, or even in quarters. So what I tell my students to do is, if you've got 60 questions in a paper, go to the middle, so 30 questions, and then tend to go forward a page. It depends if you're doing something like a verbal reasoning or a non-verbal, it might be half a page. Rule a line and stick the time that you need to be at that point. It should be halfway through. If you make that point by halfway through, you're on time. If you don't make it by halfway through, you know you need to speed up. You know that your area that you need to focus on is in the first half. It helps you to have what we call an internal deadline. So it's like you're racing for the finish line, but actually your finish line is halfway through the race. You know that once you reach that first marker, you know how much longer you've got to go in the paper. And that helps us to keep with pacing. That helps us to know, are we on time? Are we behind? Again, just a simple piece of exam technique, but a piece that can tell us whether we're on time or not. We don't have to be waiting till the end. We also don't have to be doing really complicated working out of timings in our head. I know that often we can say things like, oh, it's a mark per minute, but that doesn't help if you're a third of the way through the paper. You're not going to go back and count all the marks. But knowing that you are halfway through will help to know that actually, if I'm halfway through the paper a little bit before, and I'm halfway through the time, I'm probably on time. If you are a parent, or indeed you're a student watching this, and you're looking and you're thinking, number 4, I've never thought about that before. You're not alone. And lots of people consider the exam result when they come back from a mock exam, but they don't consider where the exam happened, or indeed what happened during that exam, because often those two things are related. So if you did a mock exam and you happened to see someone you weren't expecting in that exam, or you found that you were in this room where you found it a little bit noisier than you'd expected, then we might expect your marks to decrease a little bit. And actually, that can give you something to prepare for at home. You might choose to put some background noise on whilst you're working. And actually, you can find them on YouTube. It's just people typing or people whispering. It's very easy to do so. But it helps you to be able to prepare better for that next paper. If you've reflected on what went right that has previously gone wrong, so maybe you've normally been getting a certain type of question wrong, and in this practice paper you got it right. Well, it's likely that the way that you are doing it has changed, or you've remembered something that you needed to check, or you finally understood the way to do that question. And that helps, because if we've got this idea in our heads of the questions that I probably need to check, which is ultimately what we work towards when we do when we do exam technique, when we're looking at what do I need to check, you might not need to check that question anymore. All right. I know some of you are asking, is this video going to be available later? I think the answer is probably. It depends on how much Facebook likes me. Usually they keep them and they'll go into our media tab on the group. So usually yes, unless there is something odd with Facebook. Has happened before, but probably yes. I would say always keep track of your papers, but keeping track of your papers is not the only thing that you need to be aware of. You also need to have a think about mindset. Now, mindset is all about how do you prepare yourself mentally for an exam. So if you know that you are going into the exam and you know that you are going to, you're going to worry about it a little bit, knowing what that worry feels like can be a really big thing. So sit down and have a discussion about what worry might feel like. So is it that you get sweaty palms? Is it that your tummy feels a little bit funny? Is it that sometimes you feel a little bit dizzy? Some people feel a bit dizzy if they feel a little bit worried. But first of all is that recognition. Second of all is being able to help yourself with that. And one of the things that, again, I work on with students is mindset mantras. So being able to sit there, being able to help yourself if you start to get panicked, or if you've done a question that's, a little bit, you're not sure of it, how can we easily move forward? Because one bad question doesn't make a difference. For the majority of you that are doing grammar school exams, that's 1 mark. It's 1 mark in a whole load. But if you let it affect your mind, then it affects the rest of your paper. And that is what we're trying to stop. So we're trying to stop it affecting the rest of your paper. Because if that happens, and it affects not just the math paper, say, for example, but also the English and then the non-verbal, that's a lot harder to come back from. So we want to have little tiny ways to help ourselves move on. And one of these things that I do is a mindset mantra. So things that I say to myself. So that might be in the morning, looking in the mirror and telling myself that I'm awesome. And that just allows us to be able to say it over and over again. And eventually our mind kind of recognizes that and it calms us down. It can be having a set system to help you get back on track with a bad question. So, for example, if you put your pen down, have a couple of deep breaths. So I go for pen down, eyes closed, up for a breath, down for a breath, open our eyes, put an answer. Any answer. It's multiple choice though, because you've got to put an answer in case you run out of time. Circle the question, on to the next one. And that's my simple method to help you get back on track if you've got a bad question. And it's simple, but it means you're not going to spend loads of time worrying about that one question. So as you go through these next couple of months, I want you to think about that. So every time you come across a question, you can't answer it, pen down, up, down, couple of breaths, circle, pick an answer, move on. Now, you can't do that for every question, but you can do that for when those questions are really starting to panic you. Another part of exam technique is visualization. So let me know in the comments, have you come across visualization before? Have you heard of it? Is it something that your teachers have mentioned? Because often I find that people maybe haven't heard of visualization, or indeed they think it is something that's a little bit unusual, a little bit more of an unusual technique. I have actually put down here, it's an article that links you to scientific research that says how visualization works, because it is something that is a scientific proof. So For me, I'm a scientist, and originally by training, I did my degree in biochemistry. So for me to be able to promote something, I want to make sure that the science is behind it. And so it is something that is scientifically proven. Visualization is the idea of thinking of yourself and picturing yourself being successful. And that doesn't mean picturing yourself at that school. That means picturing yourself confidently completing the paper, putting your pencil down, and walking out. And thinking about how that will feel. Now, the reason that we promote visualization, and again, it's something that's promoted in sport, it's promoted in kind of success visualization. It helps your brain to know what is coming up. So you can think about yourself in that exam hall. You can think about, oh, I come across a really tricky question, but I follow what I'm doing, I follow a mantra, I circle something, I move on, and I finish everything in time. And that's going to mean that when you come across it, your brain's already seen you do this. Your brain has already seen you circle, breathe up, breathe down, circle, move on. And it's already seen you go through this several times. So it helps you to know what to do if that was to happen in an exam. Gets your brain used to what's happening. I want you to think about the inside of the exam hall. I want you to have a think about what it's going to be like. I want your brain to be used to that. By the time you go in, it should be going, oh, that's easy. I've seen this before. I've done this before. You might have done a mock exam in a similar school. So you'll be really used to it. And by the fact that our brain is nice and used to it, it doesn't panic when we go in. We don't panic and go, oh, I'm in somewhere that's unfamiliar and I don't know what's happening. And actually, we've already thought about it. And we've already thought about what will happen if there's a question that comes up that isn't correct. And we've already thought about what will happen if we don't feel like we did our best in that paper. Maybe there were some really tricky questions. Again, in terms of technique, exam technique, which is the technique of taking exams, I have a short resetting. That's what we call it, resetting technique. Go to the bathroom, you splash your face with water, you take a couple of deep breaths, you go back in, it's a completely new exam. And just by having those simple things that you can imagine yourself doing, and you imagine yourself and think about it, your brain knows what's coming up. So that's the introduction to visualization. I'm aware I'm trying to get through this fairly quickly this evening, but just so that you get a taste of it. Talking topics. Again, nothing to do with the exam at this point. We're not talking about the individual questions. I'm not talking about ratio or inference this evening. I'm not talking about sequences. I'm not talking about cubes. I'm talking about talking. Do you know what mum or dad will be doing when you're doing the paper? Is it something that worries you? And if it is, then talk about it. Because ultimately, what happens is as adults, we don't necessarily think about it. And if you are worried about what's going to happen when you're in the exam or where you're going to be picked up, anything like that, then make sure that you have that chat. And if you're a parent who's listening to this, who's watching this, make sure that you've spent the time, sat down and discussed what's going to happen. We don't need it in loads of detail, but sometimes people come to me, students come to me, and they say they've got these questions, these worries, these kind of moments where they don't necessarily know what's happening. So they don't know what time the paper is, or they don't know how they're getting there. I don't know what's going to happen to mum or dad or guardian when they're doing the paper. Sometimes they don't know who they're being taken by. And to them, that matters. So if that is something that matters to you, then sit down with mum and dad and ask them, because they'll know the answers. They might not know them right now, but they will do. By the time you come to take those exams, they would have worked that out. That's not for you to worry about. They'll have the answers for you. And that way, then you know what's happening and you don't need to worry about it. So if there's anything that is worrying you about those exams, beyond what's going to be inside the paper, then make sure that you have talked with an adult about it. Because even things simple as, and I have students who come to me and say, what happens if I break my pencil? We've got a spare one. We'll put a spare one in the pencil case. What happens if I need to use the bathroom? Well, you put your hand up and you ask them. So do make sure that all those questions, all those tiny little questions that you might have, they're answered, because we don't want you spending mental energy on worrying about those answers. They're not something that need to be worried about. Those are things that we can deal with as adults, and most likely your parents will have done them already. They've already dealt with it. So it's not something that children necessarily need to be worried about. But if you have got questions that you need answering, then do speak to them. Now, the last thing in there is a message to mums and dads and guardians and whoever is helping take students through these exams. It is always worth talking about tricky exams, because sometimes, and I come across this quite recently, I work with students who are doing school exams, who are doing school entrance exams, and often they sit there and we'll do the exam together, and I don't get a perfect score on the exam. I'm a tutor, but everybody makes mistakes at some point. And sometimes they say to me, well, how do you deal with exams that you don't do very well in? Or how did you deal with those exams? And sometimes all they're looking for is something that they can use if they're struggling with that exam. So if you're a parent, guardian who is working with a young person doing those exams, do sit down and share. Do sit down and share those times that you've struggled with tricky exams and what you do in order to answer those questions, in order to help move on past that tricky part. Because actually, it's really useful to have that conversation. So the next thing that we're going to pop about is we're going to take a look at some very specific ways to answer some math and some English questions. Now, these are slides that are taken from our 3-week bootcamp. I run a 3-week bootcamp that covers English, math, and exam technique. Obviously, when we do it in the bootcamp, it's a lot longer, but I've tried to condense it down so you can see some of those techniques and take them away and use them. So, as I said, these are taken directly from our slides. So if you see something that doesn't necessarily make sense, it might be that it was later in the slide deck, but I've just picked certain bits out for you. Okay, so math. Let's consider math. Now, typically, we're looking at improving speed and accuracy, because often it's if we improve speed, the accuracy will decrease. And that means that we're rushing and we're getting more wrong. Is there any point improving the speed if we're actually decreasing accuracy? We're probably not getting better marks. So we need to try and improve them both the speed and the accuracy. So 5 of these different areas could be, now you will know if you have done these and you have maybe fallen prey to these silly mistakes, and actually everybody does it. We're just looking at ways that we can improve them. So timing. Lots of you said at the start, timing is one of those things we need to be really, really aware of. I've said before, drawing that line where it's halfway through and halving the time, or doing it for a quarter. But rushing usually means silly mistakes. Spending too long on a question means missing out at the end. So you really need to know, what are you doing quickly and accurately, and what is it you need to spend the time on? So what is it that you can not rush, but you can do quicker, and what is it that you can do slower? Then you've got the question type that I call information overload, where there's loads of words, there's loads of numbers, and you need to pick everything out. Then you've got silly mistakes. I don't like the word silly mistakes, but it's a mistake that you made that the moment you see it, you go, oh, I knew that. Someone's saying here that they've done all of these mistakes. Everyone does these mistakes, but it's about minimizing them. Everyone does them. It's just about decreasing the numbers. Not understanding the question or misreading the question. Sometimes we don't read it fully. We go, oh, I know this. This is really similar to this type of question that I did last week. I know how to do it. I'm really good. I'm going to do this. And you haven't read the question. You've got the question that you want, not the question that you've read. And then the fifth part about not writing or drawing your working. Math teachers go on and on about showing your working. And the reason that we do is it actually makes it easier to check. Because if you've got a little piece of working on your question paper, not on your answer paper, because that needs to be kept clear for your answers, but if you've got a little piece of working out on your question paper, you can go back and check that working. If you've not written your working down, you can't go back and help yourself. So working is there to help you. Now, I've gone through a couple of those parts. So tips to speed up working. Stop, plan, execute. If you would see this question and you would rush it, then you would use the right hand method. If you stop and think, you'll use the left. So it's 17 lots of 13 plus 19 lots of 17 minus 2 lots of 17. Now, I can look at that and imagine there's brackets. 13, 19, 2, plus 13, plus 19, minus 2. And I can see that each one of those is times by 7. But if I rushed it, the first thing I'd be doing, 17 times 13, gotta go, 17 times 13. Next thing, 17 times 19, gotta go. Can you see that? The right-hand side, 13 times 17, 19 times 17, 17 times 2, and then we've got to add them all together, and then we've got to do the minusing. That's going to take a lot longer. But it's what happens when you rush. So what you need to do is stop, plan. And by plan, I don't need you to write out a plan like you would in creative writing. I just want a plan of action. There's 2 ways that you can work this out. You can notice that they're all times by 17. So you can go, oh, there's 13 lots, then there's 19 lots, and then we're minusing the 2. So overall, it's 30 lots of 17. Or you can rush into that answer. Stop, plan, execute. And those of you that have worked with me before, sometimes I put in an additional step, which is about instructions and drawing out those instructions. And it is just so that your brain has a little bit of a chance to catch up. Because we all want to go fast through these exams. We know that there is time is tight. But if you spend just a moment of stopping and thinking, then exactly as someone said, you can use BibMaths, you can use brackets, you can start to look at what you're actually doing in the exam. Or you can do it a long way. Now, the easiest thing, I've got a couple of people who've asked for clarification. Usually as a grammar school, so we're talking purely grammar here, and independence I'll mention in a moment. If you get a pure grammar, you will get an answer sheet. That answer sheet will have just letters on it if it's a multiple choice. If you're doing one that's got some standard answers that's written by the school, I'll do that in a moment. If you are taking something like GL, where you've got an answer sheet, you have to mark your answers on, then you do not write anything else on the answer sheet. But you can write on the question paper. Now, the flip side is, as somebody has said here, if you are taking, for an example, a independent school, or you're looking at stage 2 for SET, then you may well get marks. So if you've written your working down, you might get working marks. So in both cases, it's useful to write that working, but do, before you go into the exam, take a look at your exam format. So just simply type into Google and have a look at, you'll know whether it's GL, whether it's CSSE, whether it's Future Stories, whether it's Sutton SETs, whether it is the individual school. Dependent on the school depends on the answer sheet. So do take a look at the answer sheet and see what it will look like. Okay, a different kind of question, an information overload question. Now, these questions, it's not about answering them this evening. It's just purely about seeing those questions and looking at the different ways that you can solve it. So on my way to school, I bought a pack of fruit gums. I ate 2 of them secretly in my music lesson. Then at break, I shared 1/3 of the remaining fruit gums with my friend. I then finished the fruit gums, eating an equal amount in my next 4 lessons: biology, math, art, and English. What is the smallest number of fruit gums that I could have bought? And there will be some answers in there. But there's loads of information. Do I need to know that the 4 lessons were biology, English, art, and math? Art and math. No, that's something I don't need to know. Do I need to know that I ate 2 of them? Yes. Do I need to know that I ate 2 of them in my music lesson? No. So information overload just needs to be simplified. And that could be, if you are doing something like an algebra equation, you could write this out in algebra, or you can draw a picture. Now, it's about simplifying. It's not about who's got the best method. It's about the best method for you. But trying to work that out just on its own, obviously there's no answers, but once the answers were there, it would be confusing. There's loads of different stuff. There's also numbers that are hidden as words, 1/3, for example, there. So I can't just go along and look at the numbers, which sometimes people use as a technique, because it's got 2 as a number, 1/3 as words, and then it says equal in the 4 lessons, also as words. I need to have some form of diagram, have some form of written or mathematical equation to help me work that out. And then once I've done it, it becomes a little bit easier as a question. So if you are typically, again, look back over your previous papers, take a look over the next couple of months. If you are typically struggling with information overload types of questions, try simplifying. Simplify it with a picture, simplify it with a bit of algebra. It can always help you to simplify. And then I think probably our most common mistake, most tutors will come across some version of what we call a silly mistake. It isn't really a silly mistake, it's a sense mistake. Sense checking would usually be the type of thing that checks this. And often you will see it as a student too. These are the ones that when mum and dad show you their exam, they say, oh, we've been through it and marked it, you immediately go, oh, yes, I knew that. So do make sure that it's something that you can look at. So just make sure on that. Good. Okay. What I need you to do is just purely to sense check. So here's an example. Check whether your work is reasonable. If you had to do 19 times 17, sense check it. Round them both up. 20 times 20. If you get 800 and something, you're probably off. So estimate. Try and work out. If I know that I've got 19 times 17, I can do an end figure check as well, which is just 7 times 9. If I know that 7 times 9 is 56, my answer should end in a 6. If it doesn't, I've probably done it wrong. And I go through again. So just work out kind of what's happening. Sorry, 9 times 7. 9 times 7, 63 should end in a 3. But I need to make sure that my numbers work. I need to make sure that my end digits work. So do make sure that you've done that sense check. So do it in terms of levels, do it in terms of end of number, work out what on earth do you need to be doing to check. So sense check yourself, just like I did there. Then if we switch over to something like English. English is often timing. Tell me in the comments, is it usually the English that you struggle with the timing on, or is it the math? I'd really love to know. So let me know what is it that that tends to take the time. Maybe it's verbal, non-verbal. Those are 2 that I've focused on math and English this evening, but it might be something that you typically get struggling with time. But for English, sometimes we're talking timing. Sometimes we're talking about really what to do if. And again, I've got some examples down here. Reading, how to know where to go. Somebody particularly asked me, someone said to me, Do you read the text first? Do you read the questions first? How do you guess words if you have no idea what they mean and they're asking what do they mean and those types of things? So how do we even get there? How do we even work something like that out? Punctuation, grammar, spellings, and then different kind of rewriting question techniques is some of the stuff we go over. As I said, this is a kind of small little part of taken from a bit of a bigger course. Okay, so some people are saying that they're struggling with some of the math stuff, so hopefully some of those bits of exam technique are useful. And some of you are saying kind of English. Oh, an interesting one on creative writing. Creative writing, I posted a checklist for you to use. I think it was probably 2 weeks ago. Go back and have a look with that, because that actually should help a little bit with checking through creative writing. But in terms of English, if we have a look at reading, now lots of people worry. Lots of people worry about what happens if I have to go back and reread the text. Sometimes those texts are long, sometimes they're shorter. But if you've got even several texts, because some of the 11 plus exams do more than one text, knowing how to get back once you've gone through the question, maybe the question asks particularly about a particular place, or it asks about a word, and you know it's there, you just don't have to read through the whole thing. So there's 2 different or 3 different techniques that I like to use. Number 1, after every paragraph, I use a 3-word summary. There's an app somewhere, I think it's called What 3 Words. It helps you to find places. It's really good. But it gives a little square coordinate, 3 words. It's not as random as those words, but really this is what we're doing. So if there is a character and they're lost in the woods and they feel like there's all of these eyes watching them and they're stumbling around in the woods and it's really dark, then I might write dark woods eyes next to that paragraph. Takes me less than a minute, dark woods eyes. But when the question says, what literary device does he use to make them feel like people are watching them in the forest? I can just scroll down, woods, there they are. That's where they feel like they're being watched, eyes. I found that paragraph, I can go straight back to it. If you don't like the idea of writing 3 words, you think it'll be confusing, try a little drawing. And I put here specifically, stickman drawing. I'm not looking for great artists. For me, I'd draw someone with their arms out like that, and they'd be in a wood, so there'd be a tree there. And that would help me to know what paragraph to go back to. And then my third final technique would be to underline those keywords, but sparingly. I've seen some of your work, and some people's work, there's lines everywhere. And that doesn't necessarily help us when we know where to go back to. So be very, very selective with the words. Are the words going to help you to reorientate yourself if going back and reading is what's slowing you down? Yes, originally, when you are reading those questions, when you're reading, the text, it is going to take you slightly longer, but it's going to help you later on, the same way that writing working helps you later on in math. Everything is about helping you to check. If you can get to the point where checking is actually working through instead of looking. Looking is what lots of people do. Yep, there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer. I've checked. You haven't checked. What you've done is looked. You've looked to see if there's an answer. Checking is redoing the question, doing the question in a different way, doing the question backwards, making sure that your word matches the summary, making sure that if you put that word back into the sentence, it makes sense. It's not just looking for an answer. So try that for reading, if reading is the bit that slows you down. Now, somebody specifically asked me, and I'm really glad that they did actually, with this. Do you read the questions first in English, or do you read the text? And I'd be really interested to know from people who are listening this evening, do you read the text first, or do you read the questions first? Because I would always say it depends on the student. But I'd be interested to know what lots of other people do. Now, I've put here beta test. Beta test is used by, I suppose, computing people. But really what we mean is try it. Try some where you read the text first. Try some where you read the questions first. See which ones are better. Some people are saying text, question. There we are. People differ, right? There's no one way. If there was one way to answer the 11 plus, everybody would teach the same. And everybody from one tutor or one agency or one company, one book, everyone would get that. And no one else would. Because that's not the way that teaching works. It's all about finding the right thing for people. So have a look yourself. Try it. Even if you think I'm much better if I do this the other way. I want you to try. You've got time, so try it out. Some people focus a lot better once they've read the questions because they know vaguely in their head what they're looking for. We're not talking about answering the question. We're talking about reading through the questions, then reading through the text. Others, the moment they've read those questions, they rush the text. That's it. They can't slow down. They've got to get to those questions. I like to skim the questions. I like to highlight some important words, underline some important words. Then I like to spend quite a long time. I use the stickmen to summarize my paragraphs. I like to draw. And then I do some in-depth reading, and then I go for the questions again. If you find you read a little bit slower, probably best to read that text first, because ultimately you can rush slightly more on the questions, but you can't answer the questions if you haven't read the text. So that's the way that I prefer to do it, but I really would love you to try. And I'd love you to come back and tell me whether, if you've tried, which one you still prefer, whether you still prefer the original method or whether actually you found that it's better the other way around. That's something I'd love to find out. Drop me a message if you do it. Okay, right. We are almost at the end. Oh, good. I thought I might take an hour, but I've taken slightly under. Perfect. So last things that I wanted to wrap up with. Exam technique, it's all about how you do the exam. As some of you said before, it's not about the content, but it is something that can boost your grades. It's something that is all about your mindset. It's about the way that you go into something, as well as individual subject specific ways to speed up kind of accuracy, to go down and to really change the paper. Now, if you are, I'm going to have a quick look. Someone's asked me a question here. Do the questions usually go in paragraph order? Often they do, yes. Do the questions asked usually go in paragraph order? Often, yes. However, there is not a guarantee. And I have seen independent schools where it has not. I think most grammar schools do, but I have definitely seen independents where it's not gone in order. It's a really good question, though. So typically the questions will go in the order of the text, but not always. And especially if you're doing something where there's a comparison of texts, you'll find that there isn't, because there'll still be some comparison questions. So sometimes, but not always. So thank you for asking that question. It was that's actually a really good point. If you've got additional questions, if you've got things that you want me to cover, just pop them down in the comments and I will have a look. I want to make sure that I've covered everybody's stuff. But yes, like most of you said, it is about accuracy. It's about speed. It's about approaching those papers. Okay, perfect. All right. So I think the remaining parts for me to say, I want to say thank you to my team, to the team that are here, to Deep, who runs the group, to the admin team, because ultimately we're all here to support you. So we're all here to make sure that you get the best results you possibly can. And I want to say thank you because they're really supportive to me and that's really lovely as a tutor. So it's really nice to have. So thank you guys. I want to say thank you to you guys because you have listened to me. And if you are looking for additional exam technique, mocks, tuition, we do run a 3-week summer boot camp. Please do drop me a message about it. I'd be more than happy to chat about it. We run it twice throughout the summer, specifically for year 5s. And then for year 4s and 5s, we run 1 week mock exam, 1 week 1 week courses. There we are. That's why I wanted to keep it less than an hour, because my brain goes. If you've got additional questions, please do tag me in them. I'll be going through the comments. I'll be trying to answer anything that comes up. I always do try and drop back into these, but thank you ever so much for joining me. And I would love to stay and chat, but I know that lots of you have dinner time. So I'm going to say thank you to everyone, and good night. Thanks then. Bye bye.